Hi, my name is Vincent Volpin, and I'm a bit of an FPS enjoyer. About 20 years worth of enjoyment, so yeah, a bit. And my favorite first-person addiction has had a massive update, and I want to talk about that. You see, I'm a big nerd that spends entirely too much time thinking about the things that I enjoy, and that led me to making a giant nerd spreadsheet with all of the agent information in the game. And I planned on making a video talking about what I found, because there are so many people who play this game and just say that something is good or bad and they never explain it, or have any receipts to prove what they're saying is correct at all. Honestly, they kind of just say shit and then everyone goes along with it, and I wanted to get some actual information out to the community so that they can reference it and edit as needed. Like, seriously, there is so much misinformation in this game just based off of people saying things, and I bet it's mostly because nobody's really cared to document it at all. So I'm gonna go ahead and start that now, but the thing is, this patch has actually set me back on everything that I gathered beforehand. Like, seriously, this update changed so many values that I needed to wait until the patch happened to get anything up about this. So in this video, I'm going to discuss all of the numerical changes done to agents and their weapons and upgrades and how it matters. This video is not going to talk about Mara in any shape or form or any of the new content. I am strictly discussing the changes to time to kill and all of the guns and upgrades of existing agents. This video can also be looked at as like a TLDR for all of the numerical changes as well to all of the weapons, just to see if something feels off and you can't quite put your finger on it, but you also don't want to read through all of the patch notes for that. Understandably. So let's go ahead and start with the universal changes. First off, you have 130 base health, and characters have between 40 to 50 armor base, which is no different from previously. Only the male characters in Strinova have a sporting 50 armor. Fragrance, Flavia, Audrey, Lewine, and interestingly enough, Galatea are sitting at 45 base armor, and everybody else is at 40. These armor values are unchanged from the previous patch, but it is worth mentioning this here. You basically start round 1 on demolition matches with almost as much effective HP as you would have with armor in the previous patch, light armor specifically, and that's what's going to make the first round feel significantly better. In fact, I would argue that picking armor for round 2 isn't anywhere near as necessary as it was last patch, depending on the character you run and what their first awakening requirements are. But I have yet to test that. Armor has also been adjusted. Light armor now only gives you 40 armor versus the old 50, while heavy gives you 20 more armor than light, making that 60. And light armor now has 8 armor regen, while heavy armor has 2. This means that you are no longer shit out of luck when you get nicked by economy player and lose all of your heavy armor straight before the sight push happens, so yeah, I like this change, honestly. Furthermore, the guns have been universally adjusted with each of the characters as follows. Reload upgrades were buffed by about 2 points, so that makes reloading feel marginally faster than it does before, post-upgrade anyway. And effective range as an upgrade was completely removed from the game. Thank fuck. Recoil handling upgrades were buffed, so the universal ADS recoil has had a slight rework, and Springification has been universally nerfed to not feel quite as strong as it was prior in terms of damage reduction. Your base Springified damage reduction has been reduced from 33 base with a 46% damage reduction with the upgrade, from the original 40% base and 50% with the upgrade. While Springified damage boost on your gun was boosted from a 67 base with 80 upgrade versus the old 60 base with 72 upgrades. I do not know how these numbers actually influence the damage to Stringy in any way, shape, or form, but I had assumed that it was about a 12% difference. I figured it was a percent chance, or a percentile rather. But there's clearly something else going on behind the hood. The only thing to take note with the new Springy changes is that it's just not going to feel as overpowering when people go Stringy in terms of the damage reduction, and it does appear as though that the damage to Springy targets on your weapon seems to almost completely nullify the damage reduction upgrade. So it simply counters damage reduction altogether, or just gives you bonus damage on Stringy targets. So here are the numbers on screen that I found while I was testing with Celestia pre-patch and post-patch. I don't have leg damage in there. Sorry, I didn't think it would be super relevant, but I grabbed it the second time around and not the first time around, but these are the values that you have using that. Now, you might also notice on that script that we also have a whole other subsection underneath the bottom, including base damage and rate of fire, so let's go ahead and get into the individual character upgrades, because I have a lot to talk about here. Starting with Celestia, of course, she got a fat buff with this patch. She lost her effective range and movement speed upgrades and instead got base damage and rate of fire, and that is huge for being able to contest with the harder hitters on the roster. Everything else looks mostly untouched on her, outside of the universal changes, so her gun is still going to feel awful in terms of general accuracy. In fact, actually, it loses out to Ming's AKM, but she packs a real punch now with her raw bullet damage. All in all, Celestia feels a lot better in gunfights now. Audrey, on the other hand, has had a small nerf to her base damage and rate of fire upgrades while not touching her base values of her gun in any way. This is pretty much universal across the board, mind you, but I didn't include it in universal changes because some characters never had base damage, so it feels more like the devs are dialing back the harder hitters and then putting everybody else in line with them that didn't have access to either rate of fire or base damage in the first place. Additionally, Audrey also got a buff to her ADS upgrade speed as well, which this is also somewhat of a universal change, but it's a unique situation with each character. ADS speed appears to be a standardized number for each character depending on some situations. For example, most agents start at a 45 base, and if they get an ADS upgrade, then it goes to either 60 or 63, depending on if it is Meredith or Audrey, which both of these characters are the only characters, aside from sniper rifle users, that have higher ADS speeds, and are limited to Lewine and Yugiri at 50 and 43. And honestly, I like this change, because it makes everybody feel like they are on about the same level in terms of general reaction speed for ADS timing. I think this will be a positive change at best and a non-offensive change at worst. Now, speaking of Yvette, her effective range is now gone, as well as her Kill You magazine, so she no longer can sit at 40 rounds, but in exchange, she now has base damage and rate of fire. Additionally, Yvette's movement speed upgrade has also been buffed by about 4 points, which is almost as much as the bonus that it gave beforehand, which is fantastic, because previously movement speed only gave you about like a 4% movement speed bonus. I don't know, I have footage that I'm hopefully playing in the background while I'm talking to you about this, but I timed it out pre-patch. Movement speed gives like sub 4% of a benefit, which is literally less than half of the bonus that you get from Springify movement speed, and it was fucking negligible to stack with sprint speed previously. It's even better since movement speed is only available on like 7 characters now, and most of them are the shotgun and the sniper rifle line who need it most, but also it makes it more unique of an upgrade to Yugiri and Yvette. I'll have to play around with them more to see how substantial this movement speed buff is, so I'll get back to you guys on that one if I wind up doing that in a video as well. Lewine is basically unchanged. Yeah, she had a nerf to her base damage and rate of fire, with slight buffs to recoil handling and reload speeds. But again, these are universal, so I'm no longer bringing up ADS speed or reload upgrades beyond this point. Now, Flavia is going to feel like she got bonked real hard with a nerf to some people, but trust me, she's doing just fine numbers-wise. Before the update, Flavia's DPS, when assuming that all shots hit the enemy in the head at 10 meters, was literally like less than a singular point of damage. Higher if you picked rate of fire over base damage, so the rate of fire nerf really isn't as bad as it sounds. Her base damage was also nerfed, if you couldn't guess. Also, the magazine size upgrade lost a round, and then they added it into her base magazine, so you now have 26 at base and 31 with an upgrade. I don't think that'll matter, ultimately, but it does feel more like they're trying to make there an actual decision between picking either reload speed or magazine size when you take into account the reload buffs. And let me tell you, that reload speed feels nice as hell on Flavia right now. And then Fuchsia got hit with a fat damage nerf. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie with you here. She's still top tier on like the top 3 DPS characters in the game, I believe, but I need to run all the numbers and get back to you on that one. Like everyone else, her base damage and rate of fire got nerfed, so yeah, whoop-de-doo. Except Fuchsia had the most massive and substantial increase to her base damage compared to the rest of the cast, giving her literally about 20 more DPS in the previous patch when running base damage and headshot damage. Her rate of fire now pushes Fuchsia a little further to about 512 DPS from 509 with base damage, so this is objectively more damaging versus before. However, with all of the numbers I have crunched so far with DPS values, rate of fire is not nearly as impressive of a DPS increase to characters versus comparing it to their base damage alternative. In fact, they are all so close in value that I'm willing to bet that it won't even feel that different in high-level play. So until somebody puts out numbers for all of the damage breakpoints in the game, with the new system, with the new health and all of that stuff, base damage and rate of fire are pretty much fucking-changeable as far as I'm concerned right now. Fuchsia's still going to be a deadly adversary out there on account of her ultimate skill, though. That fire rate boost is bloody insane, but Fuchsia won't be able to just stat check people as easily anymore thanks to other characters being more in line with that 500 DPS sweet spot, so overall, nerf though. Oh, my girl Fragrance, in my opinion, is about to see a lot more play in mid to high level lobbies of Strinova. We'll have to see how that turns out though. I've always thought that Fragrance was a pretty strong agent, honestly, due to how she can buff her rate of fire by like 10 to 20% with her pink perfume, as well as the entire team. But now she can do this on top of base rate of fire increases, because she can select base damage as well as rate of fire at the expense of losing her sprint speed and effective range nodes, just like Celestia. What this means is that you now have a support agent that can use Michelle's gun, melt people with an already high precision, high fire rate weapon, then buff it by an additional amount with her active skill, while also healing everybody's HP consistently, which just got buffed to 130 points from 100, while being the queen at faster sight rotation. I'm just saying, I suspect we're going to see a bit more of Fragrance now. Oh, and she also got that goth mommy skin, so yeah, you're welcome. Meredith and Yugiri both got an extremely similar upgrade rework. Originally, they did not have rate of fire or a base damage upgrade, but they both received a base damage upgrade and kept either ADS speed if you're Meredith or sprint speed if you're Yugiri. This gives both characters an interesting identity with their playstyle and their respective weapons. The important thing that I love about these changes is where they sit in the upgrade tree now. A lot of upgrades have been moved where there's an actual decision between which two you need to take for the node. Meredith has to choose between ADS speed or recoil, while Yugiri gets sprint speed or ADS recoil. This actually feels like there's a genuine choice here on whether or not that you are playing a hit and run playstyle or if you are more stationary, I suppose. And now for the big one. Oh boy. So let's get into the big question of the patch. Where do Ming and Galatea sit on their gun rebalances? Starting with Ming, she of course got slapped with the fat base damage nerf, while her rate of fire actually increased to 600 from 595. This is because they subtracted 5 points from her upgrade bonus and they put it into her base. Ming has also received a substantial weapon damage nerf as well. Gala has also received the same changes, by the way. Base weapon damage slightly nerfed and base damage upgrade was reduced. However, Galatea now sits at a base rate of fire at 700. And let me tell you, this shit feels ridiculous, guys. Her new rate of fire buff brings her to 735 rate of fire. This is nearly Lawine levels of rate of fire, guys. Gala has also received an additional bullet, making her magazine size 26 at base and 31 with upgrades. So with that being said, whose gun slaps harder? Galatea's base DPS, when assuming that all shots hit the enemy in the head at 10 meters or less, is 431.6 repeating. Ming, on the other hand, does a clean 400 solid flat DPS because it's 40 damage, 10 rounds per second. With headshot damage and rate of fire, Galatea can dish out 526.75 DPS. Guys, remember that Fuchsia now does a maximum of 512 with the right upgrades. Ming, while running rate of fire and headshot damage, now does around 490 DPS if we round it up. That is a whole 36 points of damage less than Galatea per second, and 20 less than Fuchsia. If we instead go with base damage, Gala does 501.6 repeating for DPS, and Ming would deal about 490 again, on the dot, not rounded up. I think base damage with Ming is going to be the way if you play her though, rather than rate of fire. She now deals an additional 10% damage as well to shields. So this value doesn't really tell you the whole story on DPS, and again, this is nothing but misses on the head at 10 meters or less. But the reason why I use this metric is because it is the most substantial number. Like, this is the absolute worst case scenario, so this is the biggest difference between characters that you can get. Do keep in mind, though, that this 10% damage bonus that you get with Ming on shields is not applied when you actually crack the enemy shields, at least from my testing. And it might still apply if you were only able to crack the enemy shield while applying the 10% damage bonus, but I haven't been able to test. That's a very niche threshold to test on. Taking this into account, however, even if we assumed all headshots that Ming takes while running headshot bonus and rate of fire, her DPS would increase to 538, so a little less than 12 points more. So while that is still like 10 points of damage more than Gala at max potential, you still miss out on the extra round in the gun, as well as requiring that all 538 of that damage is only on shields, and that is simply not going to happen in the current meta right now. That being said, I don't think that Ming is being put into obscurity yet. She actually is quite a bit of a soft counter to Celestia shields, and of course things like Mighty Meow and Leona cubes, since they are considered to be purely armor. On to DMR characters next, though. Nobunaga, starting, is mostly unchanged. He got the same universal changes as everyone else, so there's not really anything to talk about here. Maddie, on the other hand, is a bit more interesting. So Maddie lost her ADS speed upgrade and instead received a base damage buff. Her headshot damage upgrade has been nerfed, but she is also able to reach her old damage profile of 107 head at 10 meters if you run both headshot and base damage. So you can still 2-tap light armor users with Maddie at the moment. Otherwise, Maddie is unchanged, aside from the aforementioned universal changes, that is. And then Reichi got absolutely fucking neutered this patch, and I couldn't be happier about it, honestly. His weapons-based damage took a tremendous damage drop-off on headshots while buffing your chest and leg damage values, interestingly enough. This means Reichi abusers can no longer one-tap you in the face on round 1, which was so unbelievably obnoxious. If there's anything to be happy about this patch balance-wise, thank the developers for that one, because holy shit, the round 1 Reichi aces really were pissing me off. So numerically, Reichi's headshot damage was reduced to 152 damage at 10 meters from the original 180, as well as with base damage, you can now cap out at 159 damage per point-blank headshot. He also received a spread control upgrade at the expense of his movement speed and his ADS speed, so he's going to feel a bit more sluggish as well. Also, you're choosing between spread control or base damage, which is a nice trade-off. Overall, nerf, but honestly, it's a healthy one. I genuinely think DMRs made the game meta feel really toxic a bit previously, so we'll just have to see how this feels. With this being put in mind, by the way, this makes Maddie the only current DMR character with a movement speed bonus upgrade as well. So Baimo got a nerf.
Like and subscribe, everyone!
In all seriousness, I never really had a problem with Baimo. Yeah, he's annoying as shit, but Strinova has had other far more problematic agents. You know, like Reichi. I get people are disliking his ability to turn off Stringification, which is fair enough. I think that that's dumb on the account that he takes away the main fucking mechanic of the game by virtue of existing, but I digress. So, shotguns lost their pellet upgrades and instead got base damage and headshot damage. So, to do the most damage possible, you need to run both damage and headshot damage, like every other class. Which means that Baimo is back to two-shotting people, and the community is so hot and cold about it. The butthurt that I hear from everyone on either end of the fence is so hysterical to me. Like, seriously, I genuinely think that in the Strinova community, either you hate Baimo with an absolute passion, or you genuinely get off a bit when you know that your existence is pissing people off. The sprint speed upgrade has also been moved to where the stringified damage is, and spread control is now above headshot damage, so you trade general accuracy and mobility for maximum damage output on headshots, which I think is overall healthy for running shotguns. Now, Ica, on the other hand, got slapped with a fat-ass nerf. Thank Christ for that one, it was sorely needed. I don't know who the fuck turned up the dials on Ica's buff last season, but for the love of God, keep that son of a bitch out of the discussion when there's a nerf or a buff, because that shit was way too much. Honestly, it was probably the same guy who thought round 1 180 damage on a semi-automatic DMR with a scope on Reichi was a fucking good idea. She also got the same adjustments as Baimo, but her base damage on her weapon without upgrades was reduced, so you won't be seeing Ica's paving half of your team from 30 meters away while holding W anymore. And trust me, the base damage does do something, even though it doesn't actually show it in here. She gains about 4 extra damage when you get real close to these guys. And as for snipers, honestly, they're almost completely unchanged, aside from scope changes. I don't know how I feel about that yet. Both snipers no longer have a switch scope upgrade, and instead they have something called a zoom scope, which gives you the ADS buff regardless of which one that you pick in the bottom right corner, but changes your zoom level on the gun. So I'm assuming that the devs are balancing the game in favor of quickscoping, which I personally hate this with a fucking passion, since I genuinely think that sniping is unbalanced in the game and a little bit toxic, especially with that son of a bitch that can quickscope you from 4 feet away because all they do is hit Kovacs all day. Yeah, I might be a little bit biased here. Listen, I'm not trying to be an asshole to people that enjoy sniping in this game, but what I am telling you is that your selection of an agent is definitely unbalanced and in your favor at higher skill levels. It just feels like snipers were added into this game because, hey, it's a shooter game and people like to 360 no-scope people with sniper rifles, and if we don't add that, then we lose that demographic. Like, I don't know, it just doesn't feel like they really thought about how they would interact with all of the other agents in the game, is my point. Jokes aside, though, now you have to choose between either mobility with sprint speed or Springify damage, which is nice, and the ADS options are beneath that. Oh, and I guess Kokona got additional bonuses to her rechambering speed for some reason, as if we needed to bridge the gap even further between which sniper is objectively better at aiming shots up faster. Honestly, that's the most questionable change for me with the sniper changes, really. That shit should have definitely gone to the economy players, so yeah, sorry, you guys kind of got shafted on that one. Anyway, that goes over all of the numerical bonuses that are added. Personally, I love the new changes. I think that gunfights are just gonna feel significantly better here, or at least marginally better. They already do for my limited experience, but that could also be the placebo effect in full swing. It appears as though the devs wanted to bridge the gap a bit closer in terms of general weapon performance on all characters, rather than having a few agents in the roster that overperform due to simply their weapon numbers. So I still think the game is going to feel mostly the same, but just with better gunfights. That being said, though, this update doesn't really change a couple of other things in the meta right now. Like, it doesn't change counterplay for blocking meta sight lines for snipers. It doesn't solve the requirement to run Reichi for his wall, since nobody else in the fucking game has access to a wall that blocks line of sight, or the fact that only 2 characters have smokes built into their abilities, but it is a step forward in the right direction in terms of balance. Especially for round 1. My god, round 1 already feels a million times better than it did previously on Demolition. That being said, I do have a few theories on what I think is going to happen in the game with all of the different agents. So first off, starting with armor, the main reason people didn't pick heavy armor in the last season was the lack of armor regeneration. So with the new armor changes, I feel like heavy armor is going to be the new go-to instead of light armor, on account of having more effective HP, and that will always be objectively better. I also theorize that Celestia is going to be a lot more higher value versus previously on account of the new armor changes, since Celestia can easily bridge that gap and give everybody the same armor regen as previous light armor at 6 per tick, so long as she has the upgrade that she needs to double up her passive bonuses, that is. And if you combine that with the fact that she can contest with the high damage dealers of the past, you get a very strong agent now. This also goes along with Fragrance. I couldn't tell you how useful that is or how effective it's going to be, but I feel like this is a great patch for supports, and you're not going to feel as helpless as you did last patch. The other thing I theorize is that people are going to think that Ming is somehow invalidated by Gala's existence now, which is weird because they both have entirely different roles, but I digress. People are probably going to swap off of Ming to Gala this season, since her gun is just objectively better, and many people picked Ming specifically because her gun was better, because people were saying it. Combine that with her armor-stealing capabilities, and that she's an unfuckwithable killing machine, so there you have it. I still think Ming is a strong pick, though. Energy Field is still one of the single best utility skills in the game for securing early picks when somebody is out of position and overextended, but expect a lot of sweaty Gala players this patch. I feel like she is very strong at the moment. Honestly, the only thing that Gala needs next is some quality of life changes on that massive-ass hitbox on her active skill, and then she would easily be my main pick. I feel like Flavia mains are also going to go down the same rabbit hole that Ming is going to fall down. Again, they're probably going to swap to Galatea, since a lot of people also picked Flavia on the same account that she plays very similarly to Ming in that she had a very solid gun. Like, I don't know, I just get the feeling that people are going to see these rate of fire nerfs and just think that Flavia can't kill anyone anymore. Like, I don't know, it's hyperbolic, but people definitely act like that in this game. Her gun is still fine, as far as I'm concerned, but expect your Flavia players to drop in skill significantly. Same with Ming. I think you can also expect a resurgence of Bimo players even more than when his banner dropped. Yeah, they're coming to fish for those sweet TikTok clips, so beware. Fuchsia mains are just the same mongoloids that they always were. I kind of love Fuchsia mains. Like, you really can't hate them. They're like dogs. They just don't know any better. Like, if you made a Fuchsia player, it was never about the gun in the first place, so you either love the shit out of the character or you're obsessed with her self-info gathering that she gains from her abilities, I still think that we're going to see many fuchsia players of questionable skill. So, Yvette, I think, is also going to have a small rise of popularity with the additional DPS and slight change in her passive to walk around in it slightly. I don't think that she's going to be a particularly popular pick, but I could be proven wrong. I expect to see a couple of really sweaty Yvette players that are going to run your lobbies. They're coming out of the woodwork this season. If the buff winds up being particularly noticeable, then she might actually become meta. So keep an eye out for that. Aside from this, Audrey, Lawine, Meredith, Yugiri, Michelle, and the DMR and Sniper line are mostly going to be the same, save for Raichi and Aika. Those two are likely going to fall off in popularity, and thank fuck for that, because people were abusing the shit out of those characters last patch for their broken damage numbers. But yeah, like honestly though, they really kind of needed to be toned down so that all of the assholes who are abusing their big numbers can just stop ruining everybody's lobbies with them. You think I'm being hyperbolic, but like genuinely, lower skill players could do what higher skill players were doing with minimal effort, and then higher skill players who would use these characters like Aika were just actually unbeatable. I have actually been against a super string player that used Aika in the last patch. It was not a winnable lobby, I assure you. That being said, however, that is everything that I have to say for this video, guys. I think the next video that I'm going to wind up doing is just kind of a quick summary for any newcomers going into the game to understand the upgrades and how they benefit their character. So be on the lookout for that. I also want to do character guides, starting with Celestia in the support line and then moving up. Maybe not Coconut for the third video. Definitely want to do Fragrance and Celestia first, though, since they are the characters that I just simply know the most in the game. I feel like I vibe with them the most, and I understand them on a very more than fundamental level. So yeah, if you guys like this video, you like the way that I explain things and all that other stuff, do let me know about this. I intend on doing more videos like this for Strinova as time goes along, now that the patch has actually been rolled out and I can dig my teeth into things. So, alrighty then, take it easy guys, until next time.